The beauty of this show is we get just the opportunity to sit and talk with some fascinating folks. You know, earlier this month marked 75 years since the attacks on Pearl Harbor that led to the U.S. involvement in World War II, of course. 3 local veterans who were in attendance in Hawaii are here with us this morning. Pete DuPre, Jack Foy, and George Haines. And just welcome, guys. We're so excited to have you here. Yeah. Of course, we want to talk about, you know, Hawaii, but there's so many other things we can talk about as well. But let's just first start. You guys are all World War II veterans. Right. We're not at Pearl Harbor on the day of the attacks, but you have a friend in Syracuse who was. Right. And that was sort of the impetus for this trip?
Yeah, well, the people who run the Greatest Generation Foundation, who sponsored our trip, they figured that a guy by the name of Larry Perry, a strange name, who lives in Syracuse, was too old to travel alone all the way to Pearl Harbor. So they asked us, we're young fellas. Pete is 93, and George and I are both 91. So they sent us young fellas off to Syracuse so we could take care of Larry on the trip. They figured he was too old to go. But it was a wonderful trip. There were 23 Pearl Harbor survivors with us, and 7 of us that were World War II veterans who were on the trip.
Wow. And 3 from right here in Rochester, representing Fairport in Greece, right?
Yeah. Right.
Wow. And it was, you guys have been talking about, you know, the all-star treatment, you know, from moment one, including who served you a meal on the plane from LA to Hawaii?
Oh,
Gary Sinise.
Gary Sinise. He was our waiter.
And I know we were looking at a picture, too, of all the media that surrounded you all wherever you went on this trip. So obviously a lot of fanfare, but of course the reason you're there, there must have been moments where it got you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it frequently does. Yeah.
I spent a lot of tears, but it was hard to take everything. Everybody was doing so much for you, and it was just one of those things. Thank you. Anything you could to shake hands, but I cried a lot. I'm sorry. It's
most of us did.
Yeah.
It's an interesting position that we're in because we are Exhibit A whenever we go. You know, where they'd say the reason for the event is to honor, well, who? Well, the veterans. Well, who are the veterans? And we are, by choice and accident, the ones that they're talking about, and it's been absolutely fascinating. We've been in a number of places in the world, but Hawaii was kind of a top shelf thing. It was fascinating to us to have our bus pull up to a stoplight, for example, and the people in a restaurant right next to it getting up and applauding us. Right, we'd walk into a department store or anything, and everybody gets up and gives us a round of applause. It's great for our ego. We had, of course, then when we have to come back home, you know, and punctured the balloon a little bit.
Yeah, I've been trying to get my family to do that for years, and they won't do it.
No matter where you went, I walked along the beach one day, one afternoon. We had time off. And I bet I shook hands and said thank you to dozens of people. Just walking along, complete strangers. But some people even come up and give me a big hug. Yeah. And just say thank you. And go on their way.
Well, it's been a few weeks that you've been home now, and maybe a chance to process everything. So we need to take a break, but I want to hear more about, you know, once you get home and once it sets in, you know, what you've taken away from this. So we're going to pause, but we have the honor and pleasure this morning of being joined by 3 local World War II survivors who earlier this month were at the Pearl Harbor Remembrance Ceremony. And I was just asking you, Jack, you know, we've seen the video, we've heard so many stories throughout the years, but I wondered if being there for those remembrances, if you heard a new perspective that you hadn't heard before.
Oh, yeah. Well, when you're talking with the guys who were actually there, the complete surprise of the attack, like during the war, we expected to be attacked, but at that time they didn't. And some of them, like there was a black man who was with us, and back at that time, that was still segregation in the services then, at Pearl Harbor time. And this guy was a cook. And that's pretty much all that they allowed the black people to do at that time, be cooks and waiters for the officers. And anyway, he manned a machine gun up on the top of it. He was on a small ship there someplace, and he manned a machine gun during the attack, something he had very little training for, but he did it. And there's others there who had their stories of being in a battleship that had tipped over and how they finally worked their way out of it. When you talk with the men who actually did those things.
Wow. Yeah, that chef, he's a pretty famous, you've heard that story, and you got to meet him. Wow.
Yeah.
All those survivors that we met and talked to, they all had stories to tell. And unbelievable to listen to some of them. One of them was telling me that he was down in a hole and he don't know how he ever got out. His friends didn't. He made it. He got out.
On land?
But what, from the hole in the ship.
Oh, it was in the ship.
And he got up and through. He doesn't know to this day. And I said, that man up there had a lot to do with it.
Wow.
But he says, my friends didn't make it. I did. I just can't figure it out.
You guys mentioned getting a lot of attention, you know, wherever you went. Pete, you got a lot of attention as well.
Yeah, it's still going on.
Some national airtime on TV.
This is attached to me, see. Everywhere we go, they, oh, hi, Pete. Pete, got your harmonica. You got your harmonica. So I do have my harmonica, and I'm going to play just a wee bit. If I may.
That'd be great. Oh my goodness.
That's a little bit.
That is beautiful.
All you gotta do is ask him. He's great. He's great at it. We'd love to hear it.
And some organizers did. You played before a big basketball game while you were in
I played
Hawaii.
at that basketball game, basketball and invitational tournament they had in Pearl Harbor. And after that, we went to a banquet that night. And while we were at the banquet, our manager said to me, Peter, I think I'm going to have to be your manager. And I said, for what? And he said, well, I've just had a call from the National Hockey League.
Oh.
You don't know this, but they called from the National Hockey League.
We got to take a break, but I want to hear the details of this, some breaking news. We're going to take a news break, but more at this breaking update in just a moment.
Okay.
We've been talking, Rochester was representing earlier this month in Hawaii at the 75th commemoration of the Pearl Harbor attack. These three gentlemen were there, all World War II veterans, and I want to hear about your individual service in just a moment. But first, we have this breaking NHL Harmonica Pete announcement.
Well, when I finished playing at the basketball tournament there, and that evening we had a banquet in our honor by the hotel, and our manager said to me, well, Peter, I think I'm going to have to be your manager. And I said, for what? And he said, well, I've just had a call from the National Hockey League, the NHL.
Yeah.
And they're having their annual All-Star game coming up in I think it's late January, in Los Angeles, and they would like you to be there playing the national anthem.
That's huge!
So that's coming up. I'm waiting for details to follow. It's always interesting, and the details haven't hit yet, other than that direct invitation that I've been asked to go and play at the All-Star game.
Wow, that's huge.
That's our Pete.
Now tell
That's my
me,
friend, the harmonica.
briefly, we could probably talk with hours with each of you about your service, but tell me where you served, how long
I was
you
a
served?
medic in World War II, okay? Medic meaning that my job was to try to put the guys back together again. I was stationed in England in a general hospital. Jack, for example, was a shoot 'em up over in France and battled the Bulge and so on. And think of a guy getting wounded and he's on the battlefield, and the field medic rather comes up and tries to stop the bleeding and so on to get him ready to go for more advanced treatment. And so our job was to provide that treatment, and they fell in Europe. They would bring them back across the channel to our hospital, and that was our point, was to stop the bleeding, fix the broken arm or whatever.
I was on the other side of the channel in France. I was machine gunner in General George Patton's army. I was 18 years old then, I guess. And I fought in France, across northern France, and then the Battle of the Bulge started, and they pulled us out and sent us north into Bastogne. And I fought in Bastogne for about 4 or 5 weeks to liberate the 101st Airborne, help to relieve the 101st Airborne Division, who was surrounded by the Germans there. And then across through the Siegfried Line, across the Moselle, the Rhine rivers, all the way, we were all the way across Germany. We ended up in Czechoslovakia, where we met the Russian army in Czechoslovakia.
Wow, now your challenge here is to sum up your service in about 45 seconds. I apologize for the time crunch.
I was a first scout in the infantry. I fought in made landings at New Guinea, Coral Islands, Leyte, Mindoro, Mindanao, and the Philippines. I had 2 years of, practically 2 years of straight combat.
Wow.
And I feel very, very lucky to have gotten through it and come back without a scratch.
Wow, and 3 nicer guys. I challenge you to try to find 3 nicer guys to hang out with. We've done some work together with Honor Flight, so I know people are interested in following up and learning more. That's one organization that you guys put a lot of heart and soul into as well. So, and we're going to be looking for you at the NHL All-Star Game. Gentlemen, thank you for your service. Thank you for being such a great part of our community and for sharing your incredible lives. It's really been an honor and a pleasure. We appreciate it so much.
Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, this has been great. Do we have to finish this? I don't want to. All right, we do need to talk about the weather, and Marty's going to do that when we come back.